Good evening. This is the Plymouth Charter Commission in the Great Hall of Plymouth. Tonight is a hybrid meeting. It's in person as well as via the Zoom webinar, and it can be viewed live on the local government channel 15 and 47 Verizon. This meeting is being recorded. Zoom attendees must register using the Zoom webinar link on the Charter Commission page of the town website. And persons for public comment on Zoom, raise your raise hand icon on the lower portion of your screen. And if in-person audience for public comment, which will be at 8:30 tonight, please use the podium and place your name on the sign-in sheet. So let's start by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight I welcome our Collins management consultants. I see they're coming on Zoom. They will be with us here in a few minutes. I just wanted to make a couple of general comments before we dig into the substance. First, just a comment on our budget. We're completing our fiscal year 2022, and we're right about on target. Looks like we won't have any deficit, nor will we have any money to carry over. Remember how we did our budget? It's heavily weighted in the second fiscal year than the first, because the second year we have printing and postage and other expenses. So we're finishing the first year okay. The second year looks all right. We did a quick analysis. We had budgeted 16 meetings with the Collins Group at $1,500 per meeting. We have a budget for consultants and legal of $30,000. We've already paid $6,000 of the Collins amount. When we will be owing them $18,000 for the completion of their services, unless we have additional meetings, which is possible. We may have a couple of additional meetings to which we will ask Collins to be present, which leaves us within just the legal consultant budget still another $12,000 for extra meetings and for review of our final charter by town council. I want to keep at least $5,000 reserved for that purpose. So as soon as when we finish in September, just before we send it to the Attorney General, we would have council review it. We've already chosen Anderson and Krieger, and they're lined up ready to do it. So it looks like we're going to be right about on target with our budget. Second thing is the schedule. We are proceeding along now each week, and I want to finish, we should really finish chapters 2 and 3. And chapter 3, it is the select board and up through the planning board. We want to finish those 2 chapters by the 4th of July weekend. So starting out in July, we would be going on with chapters 4, 5, and 6, and 7, which are fairly quick chapters. There's a chapter on elections and town boards. And if you want to look ahead to see if there's any issues there that we need to take up, we spent a lot of time on those in past years, but if there's anything there that jumps out at you, we certainly can take them up. But we've been going through the really meaty part of the charter up until now. So the objective would be to have a draft master charter in form by the end of next week, coming out of the 4th of July weekend. Doesn't mean we can come back to it. We have budgeted time at the end to come back and review and fine tune and add things, but we want to at least get through the charter, the first pass here with all the drafting and everything by the end of course, August. And finally, the third item is the meetings. The meeting schedule was passed out at the last meeting. We have, after tonight, a meeting on Monday night, which is our last meeting in July. June, excuse me. That would be on June 27th. That will be our final meeting in June. And then we have 2 meetings on Mondays in July, which is 11th and the 18th. And we have meetings scheduled, as many as possibly 4 in August, but we'll see how that goes. It's all on your calendar, which we passed out at the last meeting. And each agenda shows the future meetings. So the agenda that was passed out for this meeting shows the meetings in July on those 2 Mondays, which are the 2 Mondays following the 4th of July Monday. Okay, so that's where we're at. I think we're on target. The topic tonight, we want to go through the executive branch again and review some of the items. I passed out, or sent out, a memorandum number 7 from the Collins Management, which reviews some of the things we've been discussing in the last few weeks. And we'll hit each of those. And then I have a couple of additional issues which we need to take up. Those additional issues would be the handling of town employees. Again, I want to review that subject again vis-a-vis town meeting, precinct chairs, and so forth. The enforcement section, we've been kind of skidding around it, but we don't have the final language yet, so I think we really need to focus on what the enforcement section is going to say. We looked at different drafts of it, but we need to pin that down. And we need to start on planning. And I think planning right now, as you know, is at the end of the chapter 3. It's according to Collins, who's seen many, many charters, think we have a very robust planning already, but I think we can certainly improve upon it in the charter, and it may probably have its own chapter before we're finished. And we want to reserve another couple of chapters that haven't been written yet on communications and voting and those issues. We've got some ideas of how we can add those provisions to the charter. So let's start with unless anybody has any questions or comments, we start with the memorandum number 7. And the first item, some of this is retreading what we covered in the last 2 meetings, but certainly we'll pin them down tonight once and for all. The Collins folks thought it was sufficient to put it in again in their memorandum. First one is the re-precincting provisions. And the language that's it was sent out in the memorandum is the final language as we've debated it for the past couple of meetings. But basically, it says in every year ending in a 9, there shall be appointed a precinct advisory committee of 10 members, 5 by the select board, 5 by the committee of precinct chairs, with the town clerk serving as an ex officio non-voting member. And it goes on to say that upon request of the COPC or the select board on its own initiative, the select board may appoint the precinct advisory committee as early as 5 years prior to the decennial precinct redistricting. And then the precinct advisory committee shall study the town's precincts and population prior to the release of the final results, and shall review the final results and so forth. You'll see the language there. It's the new section 2-1-1. Does anyone have any comments on that? Because this will be the way it'll show up in the next draft of our charter.
So it says here on C, Mr. Chairman, C, it says the precinct advisory committee shall study the town's precincts and population prior to the release of the final results of the federal census.
Right. It says.
So.
Looking to see where the population is.
Right. My point is that so what, will this committee interact with the federal numbers?
You won't have seen the numbers yet.
It won't see it. I mean, it's.
This is prior to the release of the final results of the federal census. And then when the final results come out.
My point is obviously the federal numbers will not be out in 5 years or 6, 7, 8, or 9. The numbers, the federal numbers aren't going to be there. So why would we put that in there? Because the numbers don't come out until,
Well, I think we have, I mean, this is what this committee would be doing if it's appointed in the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th, 9th year. There are no
Right,
numbers yet, but it would be looking
Right.
at precincts.
I don't want this to seem like they can't look at those numbers. Let's say the board, let's say the select board and the FinCom, and the committee precinct chairs appoints this group. They're working for that year, and
the
then the numbers come out. Why wouldn't they just stay in session to
The
look
very
at those
next,
numbers?
the next sentence, so the next part of this sentence says
Okay.
that shall then review the final results of
Okay. Sorry, jumped the
upon
gun.
receipt of the numbers.
Okay.
We'll
All good.
review those results and propose any changes. So it's kind of a sliding process.
Have to read the whole sentence. Sorry about that. Jumped the gun.
Right. Okay, if there's no further comment on that, welcome, Mike and Libby. Nice to see you. The second item is the town meeting recording and minutes. Remember, we discussed how the minutes are going to be retained in a safe manner and so forth, and the new language is in 2-2-4B, which says that the town clerk shall ensure that detailed minutes shall be created, and such minutes shall contain the articles and action taken on each article. And then 2-4C says the town shall be the custodian of both the video records and the minutes specified in subsections A and B, and the records are stored in a location that is accessible for unrestricted public viewing. And the first sentence here talked about the video recording with a text record that has a time stamp at the beginning of each warrant article. So that's pretty detailed. Any comment on this one? Yes, Larry Pizer. Larry, can't hear you yet.
Giant thumb. Fail.
Larry, you may have been very faint because I thought I did hear something. So it may just be a volume.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
I'd like advice
A little
from,
louder, I can't hear it.
okay, I'm sorry. I'd like advice from the
So Larry,
Collins
is it your
people.
volume or is it the PAC TV that needs to turn it up?
Okay.
There you go.
Is this
That's
Yes.
better.
Hey, doesn't he have like a grandson or something that can fix that?
So let me just test. Mike, can you hear us okay? Let's see if we can hear you. Testing.
I can, okay,
Okay, Larry, go ahead.
okay. Just concerned that the minutes of the clerk are the official record of town meeting, and that the video recording is simply another piece that happens to be in the possession of the town.
Yes.
The concern that I have is that there might be some sort of conflict.
Well, I mean, if there is, there is. I mean, it says there are, yes, two different records. There's the official minutes created by the clerk, and there's also a video recording. I mean, if there is some discrepancy, I don't know that we need to deal with that here. I mean, it exists.
Okay, I was just hoping that the Collins people could either comment or research, because the danger of having both written and oral records is that it's not, you lose clarity as to what the official
So
record of
maybe,
town meeting is.
this is a question to Collins. Do we need to say that the clerk's minutes are the official minutes? And the video recording is just another record of what actually happened. But the official minutes are the minutes prepared by the clerk.
I don't think it hurts to add in the first sentence of 224B a reference to the town clerk minutes being official. We can, tuck it into the first sentence of 224B.
Right. Okay, that sounds good.
Bill, maybe take out the word detailed, which is sort of ambiguous, and put in
Who's
official.
speak- Betsy?
I'm sorry, Bill. Take out the word detailed in 224B and instead put official, because the word detailed is kind of ambiguous. What's detailed to you may not be detailed to me. So put in the word, the town clerk shall ensure that official minutes of all town meeting. Just take out the word detailed in 224B and replace it with the word official. Does that work?
So what is your language change in 2.24B?
Take out the word detailed,
Why does that matter?
replace it with official.
We're going to put in something about official. Larry, do you have a problem with the word detail?
You know, there's no real problem, other than the fact that it's already described
Exactly.
in
It
where
describes
where
the
it says
detail.
at a minimum. You know, so I don't, it's described what the town clerk does, detailed. The more words you have, the more opportunity you have for confusion. So if the town clerk is already tasked with creating a certain type of minutes, the word detail probably isn't necessary, at least from my vantage point.
I think Mr. Chairman.
Except,
Mr.
just one thing,
Chairman.
Bill, except
Okay.
the second sentence does say shall contain at a minimum. So there may be more detail than simply stating the warrant articles and the action taken. Bill?
Oh, I was agreeing with Betsy. I think that one simple way of intensifying the clarification, and it would be 2-2-4B, where it just simply says the town clerk shall ensure that, rather than detail, official. I think that works there. It cuts right to the chase. Official, we
What's
get
the
that.
wording going to read?
It would read, as Betsy had indicated, the town clerk shall ensure that, the word detail now would be replaced with official minutes of all town meetings and shall be created. I think Collins is probably
Okay, is
looking
that-
at it too.
So the suggestion is that the word detail be replaced by the word official. Any objection to that change? Okay, so by consensus, we'll make the change. So, okay, so the next item, which takes up 2 or 3 pages here, is the town moderator. It's fairly detailed. And there's a lot of substance. There's what the consultants are suggesting are 2 different options to handling the election of the town moderator. The option A and option B. Option A starts on page 3, and then it's followed by option B. And as I understand the difference between these 2 processes, the 2 techniques, the 2 options, option A is sort of like what we've been discussing for the last couple of meetings, where the Springtown meeting is the forum for the election of the town moderator, who takes office basically at the fall town meeting in October, with all the mechanics spelled out here, how that happens. The second option has the moderator elected, and I think you call it a special town meeting prior to the annual town meeting, which seems kind of, at least for me, seems kind of awkward, that we're not going to really call a special town meeting in advance just to do this election. Just interestingly, Mike, we do have a special town meeting frequently at the same time as the annual town meeting, but I don't think that really needs to enter into this process. But were you actually suggesting having a separate meeting, a special town meeting, as you called it, under option B, only to elect the moderator? Libby, your hand is up.
Yes, so the reason we provide that option for consideration is that the town clerk would have to run any election. And if the election is held during your regular annual town meeting, then the town clerk would have to designate someone. And that can be done. You can bring someone in from another community, or I believe they could designate the assistant town clerk, but someone's going to have to be available to answer any questions that arise during the course of the election. So if the election's being conducted during your regular annual town meeting, you're going to have to make provisions to have someone run the election. If you do it in the special town meeting that you already have before your annual town meeting, you could, the town clerk could run that part of the election if it was done separately at the beginning of the special town meeting. So that's an option. Or you can have a special town meeting. You know, the downfall of that is that, you know, there's no time to come up to speed for a newly elected town moderator to run the annual meeting if it is your intent that the town
Yeah, but I thought-
moderator who's newly elected
But
run
Libby,
the
I
annual.
thought the whole idea was that the moderator elected in the spring wouldn't take office, though, until the fall. So he'd have several months to come up to speed, whoever was
And
elected at the spring town meeting.
That's certainly something that you could provide, and then you have someone who you would announce so that's the first option for consideration that we have provided. Again, the obstacle with doing it at the annual town meeting would be providing that someone's there to run the election who's qualified to do so if the town clerk is busy running town meeting with the moderator.
Well, okay, I invite the discussion from other members of the commission. I would just say that I think we should make this process as painless as possible and not have a special town meeting. It should run like clockwork once we've done it and understand it. The candidacies would be known prior to the beginning of the town meeting. The election would be going on silently and, you know, routinely. I just don't think, we don't want to make a big deal of it. And at the end of the town meeting, it would be announced which person was elected. And he doesn't take office, though. It could be the current moderator, it could be somebody different, but until the fall town meeting. And could not the assistant clerk be kind of quietly at a table, you know, be gathering in the votes or whatever, however the people are going to vote during the town meeting?
Yeah, it's simple act of when you have to sign in as a town meeting member at the annual spring town meeting, you'll be given a ballot. And you'll sign the ballot and give it back. And it's only 136 votes, so I don't think it would be a massive burden to...
162.
162, whatever we end up with. I don't think it would be a massive burden to whether it's the town clerk who's present to confirm any concerns. Okay.
And I'd just like to say, I completely agree. I thought option B in a special town meeting didn't make sense at all. I mean, as I was reading it, I said, oh, can you do other business at that special town meeting? It just becomes totally confused. Option A makes sense. And historically, across hundreds of years, the selection of the moderator always was the first thing that happened at a town meeting.
Yep.
So
Good.
it totally makes sense.
Yeah, David.
Just for clarification, this all sounds good. As you know, I'm in favor of keeping it the way it is. But on this issue, we just said when you go in and you sign in, you get a ballot. How does this work virtually?
Well, you would, I mean, the same thing, you would be provided when you were confirmed, you would be given the opportunity to respond by email to the designated party how you were going to vote, and you could do that at any time during town meeting. I mean, we're going to have to make accommodations to the virtual component, and that could be done very simply.
I think, David, in fairness, the answer is we really haven't considered it in detail yet. But absolutely, we have to consider that and figure out how it is going to work. We just haven't discussed that part yet. Wrestling?
Yeah, I think we're trying to make it more difficult than it could be. I think that we get the foundation of doing it at the annual town meeting, decide that, and then we can work out the details of when the ballots go out and how they're and I see his hand up, but I'd love to know whether Larry feels that the clerk could step away from his written duties and take over the election at the end of town meeting. What you know, that would look like. I'd love to hear from Larry on that.
So Larry, comment.
Sure. Let me answer Wrestling's question first, and then perhaps I might make a comment on my own. It's not a question of whether the clerk can, it's a question of what the clerk's role is at the time. If there is a moderator, then the clerk can be the clerk and can conduct the election. I mean, I don't see that as a problem. If there isn't a moderator, then the clerk can't serve two roles at once. I think that's what we learned from the Collins Center. My personal comment is, we all watched town meeting 2 days ago, and we saw that town meeting took control as the last charter revision allowed it to do, and instructed the moderator as to how town meeting should be run, which was perfectly good. I mean, that's exactly what we were trying to do. If that's the case, I think we probably should revisit the whole question of whether town meeting should be the one to elect the moderator. I know that we heard from former Selectman Malaguti on that subject. And I wonder if everyone is still convinced that they're acting in the best interests of the town rather than, I know that various people have negative feelings toward the present moderator, and I would hesitate to think we're trying to design a charter over personalities. So I'm hoping that we reconsider the whole issue of how the moderator is elected, and I would agree with Mr. Malaguti that we return it to the people of Plymouth.
Just one comment, Larry, then I invite everybody else's comment. As I view this provision, I had no thought whatsoever with respect to the individual involved, because I knew that question would come up. We can't design a charter section around a person, and I'm just looking at it as a matter of practice of the design of town meeting, the checks and balances between a moderator, whomever it is, and how the moderator is chosen. I could say parenthetically, I think our current moderator does an excellent job, so that's certainly not part of my thinking. Other comment? Wesley? Okay.
I thought we had a pretty lengthy discussion on this. And I'm in total agreement with the chair on this. And personalities aside, I think that, you know, that I'd love to talk about it here, if not in other comment. I think I was extremely impressed with town meeting taking the power that it so rightly deserved. And I think it was perfectly done. It was done with respect. And I want to make sure that that provision stays in the charter, because I think that that's, but I think that we need to continue giving town meeting the resources and the power that it needs. And I think that town meeting is sufficient in creating the town moderator. I think that, you know, there could be a better process than we have now. And I think that giving it to town meeting to decide who would moderate their meeting, you know, we had a pretty lengthy discussion on this, and I totally agree with the chair on this, that we should definitely have town meeting elect the moderator.
Other comment, Bill?
Oh, I think Betsy wants to talk.
Betsy?
Several things. One, every other board and committee in our town elects their own chairman. Excuse me. And they moderate all the meetings, whether it's the select board
I
or...
think the provision we put in the charter at the last review, which was exercised at the recent town meeting, is just one part of the whole relationship. I mean, that was definitely, I think it's excellent, it was well done, it was carried out well at town meeting, but I don't think that's the end of the story. And I think from a standpoint of checks and balances and giving town meeting additional authority and standing and so forth, having it elect its own moderator, which historically is the way it always has been done in Massachusetts. I'm trying to figure out, research when that change was finally made, but I think this is just another part of the same.
Point of order, Mr.
and
Chair.
balances.
I believe Betsy was still talking.
Oh, that's okay. I had 3 points I was going to make. I
Okay,
didn't
go
say
ahead.
that, but you go ahead and finish, Bill, and then I'll
No,
make my
I'm done.
next point.
Thank
You can go ahead, and I'll finish, then I'll, you want me to go ahead?
Yep.
My second thing, so I don't think it's unusual for any body to elect its own chairman or moderator. But secondly, the opportunity for the candidates to be able to talk to town meeting, I think we probably need to put that in here so that we know when will people, I mean, maybe they could all send an email to every town meeting member saying, here's why I want to be. I'm not sure how we will get to know who it is when we're handed our ballot. It might have 3 names on it, but we may not even recognize one of those names. So we need some way to become familiar with who's running for moderator. And third, just an option C, and that is to elect the moderator at the end of fall town meeting. Spring town meeting tends to be a much heavier meeting, meat-wise, and so to elect our moderator for the spring and fall in the fall might be a better time, because it's not commonly as heavily
Right. Understand?
laden article. And we maybe could do it at the end of fall town meeting. At the end of fall town meeting, you know, Bill Abbott, Bill Cohen, and Scott all stand up and say, here's why I want to be the moderator for the, and it makes, what makes it nice about it is for a calendar year. So this fall, we would elect, if this passed, and it wouldn't be this fall, of course, but if this had passed, then in the fall, at the end of the meeting, 3 people get up and say, here's why I want to be moderator. People vote right through V-Voter, and the moderator is elected for the following year. So if we were doing it this fall, the same person would be moderator for 2023. And I think that makes more sense.
David, you finished?
Or 3 is, however long, but in other words, it wouldn't start in the middle of a year, like in the fall of a year. It would start with the annual town meeting and then proceed
it.
through. And we would not have any lame duck moderators or a moderator who doesn't know if he's going to be elected at the end of the meeting or any of those kinds of things.
David,
I like the idea of a fall election, Betsy, but maybe making it 1-year term, because I would like to be persuaded why 3 is better than 1, if only because, looking at history, Plymouth would sometimes have 5 town meetings, and at the beginning of each town meeting in a year, they'd pick the moderator. And also, one of the reasons I'm supportive of town meeting electing the moderator is, again, the sort of not residing too much power, long-term power in one hand, in one person, where a shorter term elected by town meeting
Okay,
might
so-
be worth considering, or reconsidering.
so we got 2 variations so far to consider. 1 is a fall election, 2 is a 1-year term, and a bill. Go
Yep,
ahead.
so I prefer option A. I do believe that this is an important accommodation to building some accountability, some checks and balances between the operation of the town meeting. I don't think this is personal at all. This is just about building into the process some responsibility for the town meeting members to have in relationship with their moderator, and the moderator have that same relationship. So I'm very much in favor of this. But let's do the logistics of a spring election. The thing that I had is that that the moderator would go through the process of, I guess the only thing I think about the spring of election is because we have our town election, and then it's followed by our town meeting. And during that process, the League of Women Voters has something. Betsy was saying about how will we know who the candidates are running. Obviously, if you're running for the moderator, you will reach out to the 162 town meeting members and let them know. But at the same time, when they go to get their papers and become nominated through the clerk's office, that the other systems in place during the electoral process in the spring can pick up that information and get it out more readily than if we did a fall election, because now we don't really, unless there's a primary You know, my point is that this spring election, the moderator could piggyback on already a election process that we have in the spring. So the person would be getting more notoriety out there that this is the person. Yeah, if we do the fall, Betsy, I was thinking that we don't have as many opportunities to meet the candidate, because we're only operating around off-year elections when you have like a primary or something like that in September.
That's a good point, though. Are we saying the moderator has got to be a town meeting member or not?
No, no,
Doesn't
it
have to
doesn't
be a
have to.
town meeting
No,
member,
anybody,
right?
yep.
So are we saying they can't be a town meeting member?
They can or cannot be.
They can or not be,
We're not
right?
putting
So
any.
Could be
stipulation.
anybody,
Once they become moderator,
They would not,
and
yeah.
they're not a town meeting
Yeah.
member anymore. So we've got the election coming up in May. So we elect this person in April, and they've already been running for town meeting, but now they can't be a town meeting member, so they can't get their name off the ballot because it's too late.
Do we ever run into,
people do that.
No,
People
no,
run for multiple.
I know, but I mean,
you'll have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to stay a town meeting member and they don't want to be the moderator.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we just don't want a precinct to lose a person who's running.
Let's see, David Malaguti.
As this discussion progresses, you can see how more and more convoluted it becomes. But having said that, you cannot think of a one-year term. You cannot.
We can't hear you.
Well, I have the mic on. You cannot think of a one-year term. You cannot. If we have 2 town meetings a year or 3, this poor person's going to have 3 town meetings, and then he's going to get, or she is going to get replaced. You just barely get up to speed and you're being replaced. You've got to consider 3-year terms. Put the one-year term completely out of your mind.
I do agree with David. I think we might consider at least 2, maybe 3.
Further comments? Betsy?
Yes, I just want to speak to Larry's comment, Larry Pizer. When I spoke about this option to residents, people pretty much said, I don't know what the town moderator does, and I don't know why anybody's, who's running for town moderator or why. And a lot of people don't even check off anything for town moderator because they don't, unless people are watching town meeting on television, and many residents are, but many, many are not, they really don't really understand the role of town moderator the way town meeting does. So I think that makes town meeting probably better able to decide who's going to be a better moderator than the public who either never seen a town meeting, they don't know who the town moderator is, or don't really understand the role. So I do think that having town meeting elect its own moderator makes sense.
Okay, so let's get an expression of,
Could I respond to
yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Okay, thank you. The most recent example belies what Betsy says. In, I guess it was 1992, there was a moderator who was seen to be making appointments that were not acceptable to a majority of the public. And there was an election, there were 2 candidates, and a new candidate won. I mean, that was absolutely a situation in which the town took control of who was going to be moderator. So I don't believe that the moderator is an arcane example. It's just a matter of, although a few town meeting members have been distressed with our present moderator, there has not been a choice. No one has taken up papers against them. It's also the case, and I can say this as town clerk, that the number of blank votes for moderator is not a particularly large number. I mean, there's always going to be a number of blank votes when someone's unopposed. But in this particular case, over the years, although the moderator has had a few people who have not been pleased, he has politically been reasonably popular. Thank you.
Is there any other comment? I would just say, to Larry's point, there were really, I think we're talking about 2 separate things here. There's one matter of choosing a competent person to be the moderator, and how that's done, and that's the situation, I think, that Larry's explaining what happened in 1992. But there's a further aspect of this that I think, at least I feel as a commissioner, to make this change. It has to do with town meeting itself, the organ of town meeting choosing its own moderator. Apart from personalities or persons or anything, the town meeting is sufficiently organized, intelligent enough to pick its own leader, and there's some advantage to that, I think, and perhaps how the system works. It's definitely a check and a balance, and if it doesn't work, we can certainly revert back to the way we do it now. But it's more than simply finding the most competent person within the town to be the moderator. It has to do with town meeting and how it performs. So let's see. Let's first take up the two possible variations and see how we feel about that, and then vote for the whole concept. So the first question was the time of election of the moderator, whether it's a function of the spring town meeting to take office in the fall, or whether election would be at the fall town meeting to take office in the following spring. Any
Mr.
further
Chair?
debate on that issue?
Just a minor point. I agree that the moderator has a lot to do. I would think that the moderator would take office the day after being elected, not waiting till the day before the next town meeting, because there's a lot of prep that the moderator has to do.
Yeah, good
So
point.
I would definitely say that the moderator gets elected, town meeting is dissolved,
Right.
he takes office.
Begins to think about how it's going to happen.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of prep work to do. You know, he's got to fight with COPC about whether it's virtual, and he's got to go through all the stuff that he's got to do, and motions and everything else, yeah. And towards that, I think Mr. Malaguti's right. It's got to be more than 1 year, you know, because.
Yeah, we're going to come, that'll be the
Yeah.
second point.
Okay.
I think that's-
Okay, I'm going to just speak on this point. As I'm thinking about it, I lean toward keeping it as Springtown meeting selection. Keep it the spring rather than the, and I'm thinking of the sort of fiscal year beginning July 1st and just the alignment with the preparation going into the fall town meeting and the annual town meeting, you know, the person's in place, you know, perhaps the day after town meeting, but you know, he's in place that he or she aligns with the budget cycle of the town. So I think that makes sense.
So I agree with David and Bill. I mean, I think the spring is when people are becoming candidates, and the moderator's candidacy can be folded in with other people's time for taking out papers and so forth. To do it in the fall is kind of an aberration. I mean, people are used to doing that in the spring, candidacies, election. I think it works better. Betsy?
But they wouldn't actually take out papers, right?
Well, we were talking about the nomination process, Betsy, a few weeks ago, and what they would do is if you wanted to be the moderator, you would go to the clerk's office and you would get the papers to be
I
nominated.
think they should take
And
it.
then
Right, but they wouldn't go on to, not part of the election
No,
process, the
no,
public election.
they would go
process.
through the nomination process like they do now.
Just a
And that
nomination.
nomination would be presented to town meeting.
So they would
Okay.
take out papers.
All right, yeah,
They'd get
okay.
Signatures. They would take out papers. They'd
They would
fill
have
out,
to
they'd
get signatures?
circulate nomination
How many?
papers in order to be a nominee.
Oh,
Mr.
I
Chairman.
think that's the way we contemplate it. Any further discussion on this particular point? So let's say, all in favor of the spring election, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. David's opposed, and Larry, you in favor?
Yes.
Okay, looks like, was that 8-1 in favor? Okay, the second aspect has to do with the length of the term. It was proposed that rather than a 3-year term, it be a 1-year term. So debate, comment?
I'm willing to modify that recommendation to 2. I mean, I was
Okay.
sort of reading the mental waves of my colleagues and stuff, but I do like the idea of a more frequent review, but this gives the person, you know, 2 years to kind of show their abilities at it, and also a little more time to participate in the appointment process. So I'd modify it to a 2-year term for the
Okay,
purposes
so
of discussion.
Further debate on the length of the term. Bill?
I do believe it has to be at least 2. I don't have a problem with 3, but I'll go with the pleasure of the board.
So it's proposed that it be at least 2. Is there a consensus for 2 years? My only comment is that some of the functions of the moderator, like making appointments and stuff, might be more advantageous to have a longer time horizon than simply a year. Maybe 2 years is certainly better than 1 year. So you can see how it works. Should we see if there's a consensus for a 2-year term?
Well, I think you can take a vote, like,
No.
if you want 2 years.
Larry, did you want to make a comment?
Well, 2 comments. One, there is not a consensus because
Okay.
I would not agree to a 2-year term. But secondly, there is a degree to which I know we have to give town meeting a certain amount of power, but if town meeting is going to function, every legislative body that I know about needs to have a certain amount of strength at the helm. You know, we keep comparing ourselves now. I didn't agree with this to start with, but we keep comparing ourselves to Congress. And the decision of who is going to speak and when someone's going to speak is a centralized position. I think that we have actually done quite well with the 3-year term. It gives a person a chance to show his mettle, and I like the idea of giving someone a chance. If town meeting is going to have the control, at the end of 3 years, it should be clear which direction they want to go in.
Okay, why don't we take a little more comment, and then we'll vote on the 3 years first and see if there's a majority for 3 years, and then do 2. So, Bill?
I was just going to suggest that I'll take track of, if we do a 1 year, just who's for 1 year, we write that down, and who's for 2 and who's for 3. Okay. 3 and 2, okay.
So we vote on a 3-year term. All in favor of a 3-year term? So that's 4 here, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks like 8-1. Okay,
Do we want to take a vote on 2?
thank you. Now, one final vote would be whether to have this procedure at all in the charter for electing the moderator by the town meeting. Any further debate on that issue? Otherwise, we would write it for a 3-year term to be elected in the spring. But I think the Collins people probably advise us that we do need to put the mechanics into the charter. You can't just kind of leave it vague in terms of deadlines and stuff. We've got to have how it's going to actually operate.
I would definitely have, I believe the moderator has to get 50 signatures, is that right, Dave? Okay. I believe the moderator now has to get 50 signatures. I would leave that, as the same, and have to get 50 signatures and turn his papers in.
Yeah,
But
well,
the papers, the election is during the town meeting instead of the
The next
election.
draft of the charter will have the mechanics in there, and you
Yeah.
can
Yep.
fine tune it.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay,
Oh, Mike wants to speak.
Libby,
Mike.
did you want to speak?
Either or.
Yeah, either way, I think we're probably going to say the same thing. One thing, we had commented for either option A or option B, that we would suggest, instead of collecting of nominations, that the candidates file a notice to intent. The reason being that if the entire voting pool is town meeting, 162 or whatever it is members, it struck us as unusual that they would be going to collect nomination signatures from registered voters. And it struck us as, difficult that if they're trying to collect, 30 or 50 signatures out of 162 town meeting members, that also seemed a bit strange. So we suggested, and I think there's other examples of this being done, that candidates who want to run for moderator simply file a notice of intent to run as opposed to collecting signatures. I don't know, Libby, did I add anything to that?
So just along the lines of what Mike said, is when you're gathering nomination papers, you're gathering signatures from those voters who are eligible to vote for you. And being such a small pool of eligible voters, now that you're looking at having town meeting representatives do the voting for this position, having 50 of 163 doesn't really make any sense. That's 1/3 of your, just about 1/3 of your voting population. And then if you were going to reduce it to a percentage that other positions would be required to get, you'd be looking at what, maybe 3 signatures on a nomination paper of 163 eligible voters. That doesn't really make a lot of sense either. The other issue is that you're going to have you could have 2 nomination cycles running because of the difference. You have a significant difference in time period from your regular election and your town meeting. So if you say you get nomination papers, so far in advance of the election, there's your regular general election, and then you have an election that occurs at town meeting. So are you having 2 cycles of nomination papers? It just didn't make, a ton of sense. So by filing a notice of a declaration of intent, you're taking away some of those issues that we've identified that may not make a lot of sense for this new process.
I understand, that's a good point. So we'd substituted just a filing of a declaration of intent rather than going out and get signatures of voters that couldn't vote for you anyway. So that makes sense.
And we're asking them to file it with the town clerk.
Yep.
And then how does it get disseminated to town meeting members?
We're going to read it.
No, but I mean, let's say
Yes, we're not
this.
gonna, I don't think we're going to get every little mechanic done tonight.
Okay, all right.
David?
I just want to clarify the language. It said, on the declaration of intent, said no later than 90 days prior to the end of the incumbent's term, and no earlier than the first business day of the new year. What does that mean? The new fiscal year, then what new year?
I think it means a calendar year.
Okay,
So-
because it's going to spring,
Libby, we're focusing on the language that's in there, your proposed language. So the question was when does the statement of intent need to be filed? Is that,
okay.
So the way that it's written now would be calendar year, but
We can add the
really,
word calendar.
what we're trying to do is identify a window that makes sense for someone to decide that they want to run and be eligible for town moderator. That gives enough
Yeah.
campaigning time prior to the election.
No, I understand. It does-
so we'd say calendar
Yeah,
year.
just add the word calendar and I'm fine. It just,
That's
I
fine.
know that there's the fiscal year and all of a sudden I was just a little confused. Add,
Okay.
add the word and I'm fine.
Got it. So Larry, do you have a standing hand up?
Yes, I did. I have a general idea of not disagreeing with the Collins people. This time I'm going to. It seems to me there should be a certain threshold for someone wanting to be moderator. If you want to change it from 50 to 10, that I can handle. But the idea of just saying, geez whiz, I think I'd like to do it. It's too important an office to just let someone throw his hat in the ring and, oh, what the heck. I think that there should be a modicum of support for a candidate before that candidate's name is presented.
Comment? I just think, Larry, that whether it's 10 people or, that's kind of a
Libby's got
pro
her hand
forma
up.
number, a minuscule number. Anyone can get 10. I'm not sure what we've added there in terms of gravitas, whereas 162 members are going to know these people, or they're not going to get any votes for moderator. I'm just not sure you need a large number of representative people supporting them. Anyone you can think of that, it could be a total non-starter, but you can certainly always go out and get at least 10, and I'm not sure what that proves.
Well, I think, trying to come up with what's really going to happen under the circumstances. I don't think that I'd like to see 8 candidates where 6 of them aren't really very serious and just put their names in. It just seems to me that the idea of saying moderator is an important position within town government, it's an important position for town meeting, and the idea that someone would need to just take the responsibility to go out and raise signatures. I don't think that 50 signatures for someone running for select board is a huge threshold for anyone to meet. But at least it's a statement that someone's not doing it frivolously. And the idea of having some method of preventing frivolous candidates has an appeal.
Okay. Presley?
Yeah, in thinking about this, and listening to the discussion, I see, for Betty's point of where the candidates would be able to, present themselves. I'm seeing precinct chairs, COPC, having forums where people who want to be moderator coming and speaking before the COPC. And I could see, I'm thinking of people who have thought about running for different offices and going before different groups. And I don't know how this could be formed, but I see the COPC saying, this is a good candidate, this is a bad candidate. I don't know if that's the right verbiage, but I see, COPC as the legislative, not leadership, but representation of people could come before them and they could say, look, this is a serious guy, this isn't a serious guy. I don't know if that, I'm formulating how that would work, but that's where I see the people presenting themselves
I
to
just
be
think that
moderator.
trying to get some signatures, 10 or 20, whatever it is could create kind of a bit of divisiveness. Or sort of
Yeah,
cliques
and I see
of
the
people.
Collins Center's
Right.
point on that. And I totally, not to agree with Larry, but I totally agree that should be some vetting of those people. But I see COPC, having these people come and present, and, whether COPC says, we recommend this person or
So
don't recommend.
COPC would reach out to them and ask them to come.
Yeah,
Right.
just like we do,
Yep.
for.
Okay. So
I
should we
don't-
just leave that as, just Betsy?
I don't recommend that COPC take any position on any one candidate.
Right.
Yeah, that's not
No,
what you
but
meant,
would
right?
invite them
Yeah.
to,
But yes, they could have like a presentation
Right.
forum just for candidates. You
Right.
want to be, so then town meeting members can see why Betsy Hall or Russell
I
Brooks or
suppose
whoever
we
wants to
could
be
sort
moderator.
of close the loop here by having something in the COPC's functions, in the charter that talks about, vetting the moderator as one of their functions, right?
Yeah,
David?
not in-
Just puzzling over, an earlier question about, could the moderator be a town meeting member or not? Or do we need to specify if the moderator is elected from the 162, what do you do to replace that vote? I mean, that becomes a complication that you've been raising, David.
I mean, we'd fill the position like we always fill the position, that the next person in the line that would have got the votes would take that position. That's how we're doing it now.
Okay.
If we have.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, that makes sense, because if the term begins after that, that thing,
Keep it
it's okay.
Keep it simple.
Right.
All right.
Okay, understood.
So,
Thanks. So we don't
question-
need to clarify anything in
Right.
here, okay?
So a question to the Collins Group, can you work out some language that we can then sort of fine tune? I mean, once we see it, we can start editing it. Libby, is your hand up?
So what, the language that you're looking for, is that language on the nomination or the declaration of intent? Did you
Declaration of-
decide to go
declaration of
with a certain
intent.
percentage of eligible voters? And would that be voters who are town meeting representatives, so out of the 163, 162? And would you be doing a percentage of those individuals, and so I'm
we're
just playing this
talking
out. So someone who runs for moderator has to get 10 signatures from town meeting representatives and
No,
has to,
I think, Libby, the consensus is more the opposite, that we would not require a number of signatures. It would just be a declaration of intent. I think that's what I'm hearing. But we just need also some mechanics put in terms of dates so that a town meeting member could become a candidate for moderator. Just has to be sure it works date-wise. So if he's elected as moderator, then his town meeting position becomes vacant, and it would be filled as we normally would a vacancy. Okay, so let's have a vote just on the concept, and then we'll go on to the next point.
May I
This
ask
is
one
subject
question?
to fine-tuning and seeing the actual language.
Let me ask one question. If a person who wanted to be the moderator did not go to the COPC presentation, are they not now eligible to run for
What
moderator?
did you say? If they do not want to go to the COPC?
No, but if for some reason they didn't get there, so April 18th is the night that you go to the COPC to declare your intent and why you want to be a moderator. Or no, it'd be March 18th. So then at annual town meeting, if Betsy Hall didn't show up to COPC for that presentation
it's just
form,
like
is she
any-
now not a candidate?
No, he's not barred, but it's just like any candidacy where you don't show up at
Okay.
candidate's night.
But
It
you'd
could be
still be
used
eligible. You're
against
still,
you.
but you're still eligible. Okay, just,
Right. Okay, let's have a vote, yes or no, to include this process for town meeting electing its moderator. We've considered all the variations, and it's subject to actually seeing the language of the article, of the paragraph when it's done. Are we ready to vote? Yes. We're ready to vote? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like 7 to 2 in favor. Very good, thank you very much. So the next item for discussion, this takes us over further into the substance. I'm just looking here, it was the town manager. Let's see, I
Mr.
guess we're
Moderator?
already to page 6, joint board meetings, yes, number 4. Who is? Libby, did you have a question?
yes, I had a question about what exactly was just voted. Was it option? did you
Option
vote
A.
option
Option A with a 3-year term, right? Option A with a 3-year term, with the election being in the spring, and a candidate to declare a declaration of intent.
Okay,
And
and just to
open it-
clarify,
Also open
clarify
to
on
town
that,
meeting
I just
members to
wanted
be
to-
candidates.
it's in the memo, but I just wanted to, again, emphasize that if you have a town clerk who's charged with keeping the official record of town meeting, and your election occurs at town meeting, then consideration, probably should be given to having someone else run that election if it's going on at the same time as the town meeting, where the town clerk is expected to keep an official record.
So why can't that be an assistant town clerk?
It certainly can, but I thought I heard discussion earlier about having the town clerk fill both roles at the same time. So I'm just again flagging that issue.
Right. I don't think we want to bring in a
It's in the
town
memo.
clerk from another town. I think we should be, can't we handle it with the town clerk's office and assistant town clerk?
That language is in the memo for the assistant town clerk.
Right. So I think we're up to joint board meetings. And that new language is 3-2-8, which is on page 6 of the memorandum. And it says the select board shall meet jointly with the school committee, planning board, finance committee, and all other elected boards for the purpose of sharing information. The select board shall schedule the joint meetings, which will be held no less than twice a year. And at least one of the meetings would be at the beginning of the annual budget process. So I don't think there was any difficulty with that language. David?
Well, just reading it, school committee and planning board are elected, Finance Committee is appointed. So,
But the last meeting, actually, someone suggested that to certainly include the finance committee, and that's why it was added to this
yeah,
draft.
which I think it's a good idea. I'm just saying, as you read it, it sort of implies the Finance Committee's elected.
When it says all other elected boards,
Yeah.
right?
And I think the only other elected board is what, the Housing Authority?
So that's just a drafting point, Libby, that we were focusing on, that we list all these elected boards, and then we throw in the finance committee. So maybe the finance committee should be at the end of the sequence of boards you're talking about. So it would say school committee, planning board, and all other elected boards, comma, and the finance committee.
Which I agree with. I think that's actually a very good idea.
I'm curious why we just don't name all the elected boards. Why don't we just put the names of all the
Yeah,
elected
we
boards?
just
How
list the
many are
elected
there?
boards and
There's
then the
school
finance
committee,
committee.
planning
Yeah.
board, housing authority, what are the
I think that's it,
boards?
right? Elected.
I don't, what's the change?
We have a redevelopment authority.
Yeah, redevelopment authority. So just name all those boards rather than all other elected boards. Just name the boards that are elected. And then plus the finance committee, something like that. Or just end.
Well, just so we understand, we're going to have the school committee, the select board, planning board, so those three boards. Are there any other elected boards we want to include?
There are two others.
Well, we don't need to include them unless we think they should be.
Well, it says all other elected boards, so they are included. It's just they're not named.
Yeah.
I didn't,
I guess the question is, we don't need to have these other elected boards as part of this important meeting.
Right,
know why.
yeah. Take out the
Just
words all
delete
other
where it says
elected
all other
boards.
elected boards.
I think we should take that out.
Right.
Just remove those words.
So the language would read, school committee, planning board, select board, and finance committee, and then delete where it says and all other elected boards.
Right, and then keep for the purpose of sharing.
Because then I think we've covered the major ones. Wrestling?
I don't know if this is here or it's somewhere else. We also talked about having a joint board meeting with the select board and the COPC.
Yeah, I think
scheduled.
that is in another provision.
Okay, I didn't know if it was or
It's
not.
back in the chapter 2.
Okay, thank you.
So on 328, we're removing all other elected boards, but we're keeping for the purpose of sharing information.
Yep,
Okay?
right. Okay, temporary town manager on page 6. Maybe, well, the current language is 3-4-4, and then they've revised it to a much longer paragraph, 3-4-4-A. Is the new language what's in italics at the end there? That has to do with the appointing authority.
Mr. Chairman, the our new, it's just weird the way the page break works, but on the next page, top of page 7, there's 3-4-4B, which is identical to the current
Right.
language and providing for the longer-term acting town manager. What's new here generally is 3-4-4A, which I think you've already seen, except for the red italicized text at the end, which was that we added just as a little bit of a precautionary catch-all, so that if there was a need, for example, for the temporary town manager to remove someone because something egregious was occurring, there was a mechanism. They'd have to get approval of the select board. Actually, I should say select board. We'll fix that. And they weren't stuck, with someone. Because, we don't want the temporary town manager to be making all kinds of permanent staffing changes, either adding or removing, but at the same time, in the event of a really serious situation, you want to have some mechanism there. So that's the.
So two things, Mike. First of all, we don't all have a color printer. The drafts that have been passed out tonight are not, don't show any red. So I think rather than using red, you should just perhaps use italics, like you did in one place here. And then the sentence that says, "The powers of a temporary town manager shall be limited to matters not admitting of delay." That phrase, "not admitting of delay," what exactly do you mean? You mean that can't be delayed, or that Shouldn't be delayed, what does that mean?
Libby,
So generally, that means that the town manager has authority, the acting town manager has authority to act only on urgent issues. So in terms of maybe making like long-term plans or decisions for the long term that aren't immediately necessary, required to be made,
Right,
the acting town manager doesn't have that authority.
right.
Decisions that need to be made in a timely manner, that's within the scope. So that's pretty typical language of any acting.
So you do think that's
provision.
sufficient legally clear, not, I mean, basically you're saying something that can't be delayed.
Yes, something that needs immediate attention or
Okay.
action on behalf of the acting town manager.
All right, I don't think there was anything controversial in this section. David?
Might I suggest that we eliminate that long paragraph, use 3-4-4B, which is a recap of what's there, but add the sentence, "No temporary town manager shall have authority to make any permanent appointment to or removal from any office or position unless such appointment or removal is authorized by a majority of the Board of Selectmen."
Okay, so your suggestion is to eliminate the long paragraph, except keep the last sentence, and then also retain the new paragraph B. How does that sound to our learned consultants?
I just want to understand, you're cutting out, David,
I just
the
want to see
fact
if they
that,
understand the change that we're proposing.
I think all of that verbosity is unnecessary. I don't know if that's a word or not, but I winged it.
Mike, did you have a comment?
sure, the intent is different for 3-4-4A and 3-4-4B. The intent of B is when the acting town manager is gone for a long term and unlikely to return. And this is commonly done in charters. There's a short-term temporary town manager. So the town manager is going on vacation for a week or has to step away for a couple weeks for a family issue or something. They appoint a temporary town manager to act in his or her stead for that short period of time, but they're likely to return. 3-4-4B is the, they're not coming back or unlikely to be returned. They're gone for a long time at least. So,
So what you're saying is the two sections are really of different purposes.
correct. And sorry, my apologies if that didn't become, if that was not clear.
yeah, one is called acting town meeting member, and one is called temporary town meeting member. Manager, sorry. So one is called temporary town management, that's the short term, and one is called acting town manager, that's the long term. Is that correct? The
That's
words-
correct. And just as a question too, how does it currently operate? So the town manager's gone on vacation for 2 weeks. What happens?
The assistant town manager takes over.
By what, though, how is that mechanism provided?
It's just the way that it's in the charter. When the town manager is absent, the assistant town manager takes his place. This is just simply if we need to, as we did last fall, we have to appoint an acting town manager, and the process worked well last fall. I see no reason to change it and make it any more complex than it already is. And actually, the 180 days, there probably should be a provision in there to go beyond 180 days if necessary.
I'm sorry if I missed it. I will go back through. I had not seen before the provision in there that provides for the temporary town manager, for the town manager to temporarily appoint their assistant as the town manager. If it's in there, I missed it. Sorry about that.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so let's go back and look and
I think
see
this is practice.
David's
I
point,
think it's in the
that
charter.
it worked, we just went through the process and it worked well, why change it? Let's see if there's anything missing that this paragraph adds, and if not, then we don't need it. It's what David is suggesting.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It possibly might not appear in the charter, but it's an existing past practice.
Okay, we need to do a little homework on that one, I think.
So there is a provision in your charter that says that the select board can designate for absences over 30 days, but I don't see anything that, if Mike missed it, I missed it too, and I apologize for that, but I don't see anything that's for a short-term vacancy.
Right.
I think it is just past practice.
Okay, well, so you probably want something that will vest the powers of an acting town, will prescribe and vest powers for an acting town manager for a short-term period. And if you notice in the two provisions that we have provided language for, there are differences in what their powers are because the vacancy it contemplated is of different lengths. So a temporary, where the vacancy is shorter, has more prescribed and limited powers of the town manager. An acting, which is contemplated to be for a longer period, has more extensive powers and full authority.
Mr. Chairman, I see this as a, Mr. Abbott, I see this as a potentially very valuable addition to the charter. We had a kind of a mess in the past year or so with the, who was doing what role in the town manager. There was no town manager, there was the assistant town manager filling in, then there was I believe, Mr. Hartman was appointed, is it temporary or acting town manager? But if there's nothing in the charter that prohibited that person in that position from making specific decisions, serious decisions about firings and hirings, I can see that as a potential hornet's nest that we're maybe lucky we didn't go through at that time. So I see it as potentially very positive addition to the charter.
You like the addition?
I like the addition. I think it gives clarity to that process and requires the select board to make an overt decision about who has what authority in that situation.
So let's keep this one still under review. I think I want to go back and reread some sections in the charter as well.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about two different things, what Frank was talking about and what David was talking about. And from what I see, wouldn't it be a natural succession if we have an assistant town manager, that the assistant town manager would be the acting town manager in the absence of the town manager?
So Wesley,
I
you'd
would
like
think
to
that
review
would-
this a little further before we...
Yeah, no, definitely, but
Okay.
just the comment that,
Yep. Okay, so still on the select board, going over to page 7 and section 6B of chapter 3 is the language we're looking for. I'm not sure we found it yet, but we want good, strong, very strong language that reinforces the chain of command between the town manager and the select board, that the town manager has the authority, sole authority, to deal directly with town employees, and the select board communicates through the town manager. So I take it this one sentence here is what you folks are suggesting. There's still some language that I'm trying to put my hand on. I didn't have a chance to get it for tonight, but I know it exists because I remember reading it to the commission. So, and Betsy sent us each a couple of drafts of language. We still haven't found, though, that version that we all liked, which was much more forceful than anything we found so far. Thank you for the two sections. You sent Chelmsford to us today, too. But I'm still looking for that section. So that's still open. Then the next item was the actual selection of the select board and whether we would have a select board that was combined with regional select persons and persons running at large through the town. And I think you've suggested two different alternatives here. One is a 9-member select board with 6 operating regionally and 3 at large, or a smaller select board with 5 members, 3 of which are regional and 2 at large.
Mr. Chairman,
David?
I have a distinct problem with this, and I'm not dissing on you, Collins Center. most of the charters that we have reviewed are 5 members of a select board. As Wrestling just murmured, if you go to 9, you're approaching a council. I think we should stay at 5, okay? Many years ago, it was 3, and then it was bumped to 5. I do not agree with regional selectmen. I do not agree with selectmen in charge of districts. A selectman, I should be saying a member of the select board, but I'm old-fashioned, so bear with me. A select board member should be at large, and that person should represent the whole town. And as a sitting selectman at the time, I had to very carefully make sure that I did not favor one section of town over the other. And that's what makes a decent selectman. You can't favor one area. Now, if you have district selectmen, you're going to have ward politics like you have in the city. And you could have a situation where, well, I'm not going to vote to pave your road unless you vote to increase the lifeguards at Morton Park. That's not what we want. We want at-large to represent the whole town, no districts. It's a step backwards, in my humble opinion.
Okay, let's debate it, because it certainly is an argument on the other side.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman, I'd like to make a few comments about this. You know that I proposed, I proposed the concept because I believe that the community at large does not feel equally represented. And we have a unique situation in Plymouth. I've said at times, maybe it's incorrect, this is the largest town east of the Mississippi. It's a massive town that we were supposed to focus on the village concept from way back in our master plan. We have unique villages. We have Manamet, we have Cedarville. We used to have West Plymouth, but it's been essentially overrun by development. And we have North Plymouth, a very distinct community, and the downtown area. These are all distinct communities, and it's a concept that I think we felt at least 30 years ago was something worth keeping intact. I think what we have now is wards by default. I don't think necessarily, Mr. Pizer will probably correct me on this, but I don't think necessarily we've had voting that reflects the broad scope of all these communities. In fact, we've seen a dissolution of voting in the periphery, especially in the southern periphery. And we've also seen a distortion in that we had the concentration of population suddenly appear in what was Precinct 15, and basically they could vote for their own select person by virtue of their turnout and the intense population there. So I think we've seen problems associated with the way we do things. Now, this is not, the proposal as I put forth was not to have a ward boss in every precinct. It was to have kind of regional representation to make people feel, I felt it was important that people could feel more engaged and more part of this community. There's many other ways you do that, many other things we should do, but I don't think it's ward politics. I don't think they would be doing the, there's always some kind of associations and alliances that happen on a select board, but I don't, this is not like it's Boston and everybody has their little fiefdom, but there are distinct representations. The southern part of the community, the coastal part, the western part in the woodlands, and the downtown in North Plymouth all have things more in common with each other, and I don't think it's wrong to have at least that represented in the vote for a select board. Thank you.
Yeah, this is an important point. I think we need to spend some time on it. I recognize Bill Cohan next, and then Wrestling. Bill Cohan?
And I have my hand. I want to talk too.
And,
Okay.
okay,
And
I think we all want to
Everybody's
speak
gonna
on it.
I'll be last.
I think we have to balance a couple of things. One, Plymouth has grown tremendously over the last 50 years, over the last 10 years. And there are distinct areas of Plymouth that need to have a voice. But I agree with David. This is about Plymouth, Plymouth as a whole. We want Plymouth to be the priority, but we still want to complement this process with giving voices to different parts of Plymouth. I think we need to have at-large members, and they should be the dominant members of the board, because Plymouth comes first. We're a town, we're all in this together. We don't want to disintegrate into competing elements. But at the same time, what Frank is saying, which I think is a good idea, is to bring in this idea where we do have a couple of members, maybe 2 or 3 members that are elected, one in the north, one in the south, one in the west. These are distinct parts of Plymouth that often feel as if their needs are not being attended to. So I think it's one way to deal with the growing population in the growing parts of Plymouth, but at the same time, making sure that the priority is Plymouth. We're all in this together. We got to work together
So
to
how
get
big a
anything done.
board
So I'm thinking that it would be, currently it's 5, 7 would have 2 at large and 5 at large and two
Okay.
two designated.
So let's see, wrestling, and then Larry, wrestling?
Yeah, I think this is a huge discussion. I can totally see Mr. Malaguti's point, but I'm leaning more towards, one of the reasons that we're here is that the population doesn't feel like they're represented properly. You know, we can say the select board has more union members. We can say the select board has, you know, more people from, you know, this, and I think it's our job to find a way to get the entire town of Plymouth represented. You know, whether that's 9 members, 7 members, I'm leaning more towards having more members and somehow representing, you know, that we get more representation, because it's, you know, I see less and less people running for select board because they know that there's a percentage of people who, you know, will get elected because they've got more support, because they've, you know, got the support of the union or the, you know, different boards, and they're definitely getting in. And I'd like to see something, you know, and I don't know how to do this, but something that would get more people involved and get more of a representation of the entire town of Plymouth, not just Union, not just North Plymouth, not, you know, and I think moving towards more members, you know, would help that.
Okay, Larry? Kaiser?
Yeah, thank you. Frank was correct. I do have comments on this. We've actually had a pretty wide-ranging group of people. Maybe it used to be the case that there were certain parts of Plymouth that were elected over others, but it's no longer the case that is happening. But what I would point out is we do have a body that represents the parts of Plymouth. It's called town meeting. People are elected to town meeting from the various pieces of Plymouth. The idea that somebody should be thinking about Plymouth as a whole, I think is very important. When you think about what it is that goes into the budget, what it is that goes into bylaws, all of the things that the select board does, someone has to represent the entirety of the town. You know, if you need more people, you need more people. I'm not sure that I agree that you do. It seems to me that while I disagree with various members of the select board on frequent occasion, nonetheless, I think that we have a body that we have empowered to say, this is what's good for Plymouth. And I think it's important to have at least one entity that does that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David?
I was away for the couple meetings when this first came up, but reading my minutes, my very good minutes, thank you, Michelle, and Collins, I was, needless to say, intrigued because it did feel like a council or trending toward a council. But actually, more to the point, because I respect all the covering the full town, a larger group with a super majority thereof means a larger group to make a collective and sometimes hard decision. A small group with a group of 5, 3 people can make decisions that sometimes feel clubby, cliquey, and just a 9-member, whether they're representational or even 7 or 9, we've heard throughout this entire commission, you can't buy town meeting. And in general, you can't buy, it makes it much harder to influence larger groups that you require a supermajority. So for instance, should it be 9, I would say, difficult decisions need 7. If we decide 7, I would say any difficult decisions need 5. So it makes a broader group to make hard decisions, and it's a little less likely to be influenced by smaller groups. So I lean toward the mix of representative precincts, some division of 18, plus at large. But to me, the stronger thing is a larger number. Just as someone was saying, the largest town east of the Mississippi. If you remember, my research showed we're the largest town meeting in the universe, potentially. When we looked at every New England town, we're larger and continue to grow larger. And therefore, if we keep town meeting, being, kind of stretching it and doing something that's just beyond the norm, because we are beyond the norm. We're larger and growing, and so becoming something more than 5 select board, I think, is responsive to this growing town. But I'm particularly interested in minimizing the influence that a very small group can take.
So we're not going to conclude this one tonight. Let's continue this discussion on Monday. And
Could I say one thing?
Others want to speak, and we have reached the public comment
All right.
time. And Betsy, we're definitely going to come back to this on Monday. But it is public comment, and Rich Cirque has been here patiently waiting to speak at public comment. And welcome, Mr. Cirque. By the way, your memo has been circulated to the commission several days ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rich Cirque, Precinct 2. Our present charter provides in Section 212(1) that Town of Plymouth employees shall not be eligible for appointment to the Advisory and Finance Committee.
Rich, is your microphone on?
Pardon me?
Is the mic on?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Our present charter provides in Section 212(1) that Town of Plymouth employees shall not be eligible for appointment to the Finance Committee. Our present charter provides in Section 2-2-2 that any registered voter of the town shall be eligible for election to town meeting membership. I think that you should consider asking your consultant's opinion and town council's opinion as to whether it would be possible to amend Section 2-2-2 to make it consistent with Section 2-12-1 by providing that Town of Plymouth employees shall not be eligible for town meeting membership. I see no logical reason why Town of Plymouth employees should be barred from serving on the Finance Committee, but not be barred from serving as town meeting members. A town is similar to a business corporation. In a business corporation, there are 3 stakeholders. 1, a board of directors who promulgate the goals, set the policy, and make the decisions for the corporation. 2, the shareholders who invest money in the corporation and to whom the board is responsible. And 3, the employees who implement the goals, the policies, and decisions of the board. Employees are often members of unions. In a town, there are also 3 stakeholders. 1, the town meeting, which under sections 3-3-2 and 3-3-3 considers and acts upon all proposed bylaws, budgets, and all other financial proposals of the town, and such other matters as prescribed by law, and all matters that appear on the town warrant. The town meeting is the town's board of directors. The taxpayers, who pay taxes to the town and to whom the town meeting is responsible. Taxpayers are the town's shareholders. Municipal employees who implement the decisions made by the town meeting. In a business corporation, unions do not have a right to a seat on the board of directors because that would be a conflict of interest for them when it comes to the employees' conditions of employment, their salaries, and benefits. Their duty to the shareholders would conflict with their duty to their fellow board members. In a town, employees are customarily members of unions, which, like their corporate counterparts, negotiate with the town for conditions of employment, for salaries, and for benefits. When union members serve as town meeting members, their duty to their fellow union members conflicts with their duty to the taxpayers. Why should municipal employees have a right which is denied to their business corporation counterparts? At the present time, town meeting is seated with a disproportionate number of union members. As a result of reorganization this year, 2 longtime members of the Committee of Precinct Chairs found themselves suddenly replaced as precinct chairs by union town meeting members who previously had expressed no criticism of the incumbent chairs. A cynic might say that these members are there primarily to protect the interests of their fellow union members and to oppose any changes that would not further those interests. To be sure, the outsized number of union town meeting members is primarily due to their close attention to local politics, which is commendable, and to the political apathy of the general electorate, which is not. As a result of the union's active participation and the general electorate's apathy, the field is ceded to members who are primarily guided by union interests. This has manifested itself in union town meeting members' consistent opposition to strengthening the conflict of interest provisions of our town charter and falsely claiming that doing so would conflict with state law and would therefore be illegal, even though the charters of other municipalities with strong conflict of interest provisions have been approved by the Attorney General. The Conflict of Interest Committee that I was a member of several years ago contained union town meeting members who consistently undermined our efforts. I am sure that they will fight even harder to oppose this amendment. But as we study proposed provisions to our charter, we should finally admit that the time has come to clean up town meeting by requiring union members to advocate for their interests from the outside, like all other causes, rather than from the inside. As I indicated at the outset, I think you should consider asking your consultant's opinion and town council's opinion whether it would be possible to amend the charter to so provide. I have not done the body of legal research to answer that question. I just wanted to present this issue to you now since you are reviewing Section 2.
Thank you, Mr. Cirque. Understanding that this was going to come up tonight, I already gave a heads up to our consultants to think about this question of town employees being town meeting members, because I thought probably you would already have available some research on the point. Why don't you speak first, and then members of the commission can weigh in with some comments. I think we should deal with this issue tonight. So I'm going to call on Mike and his team. You've already had a chance to start thinking about this issue?
Yeah, we've started talking it over as a team, and I don't think we can say anything definitive, and we would also defer to town's legal counsel at the end of the day anyway. We would note that on our first look, that it is very possible that an attempt to exclude municipal employees from representative town meeting might not fly with the Attorney General due to, and I think it's chapter 268A, section 1, which defines municipal employee and excludes elected representative town meeting members. But we want to do some more of our own homework on that as well. I don't know, Libby, do you want to add anything to that?
I would just say in general, just restricting the ability of a public employee to run for an elected office is generally something I think the Attorney General would take a very close look at. I'm not saying that it can't be done. The right to run for an election and hold elected office is in many ways looked at as sacred, like a sacred right of a voter. So putting restrictions on that ability will be highly scrutinized by the AG's office. So I'm not going to say or give an opinion about legality of it. I think, well, I just said I'm not going to give an opinion, and then I said I think, typical lawyer, right? Definitely run that by your counsel, but my concern is, one, does it make your charter, if you incorporate such a restriction, would it make your charter not viable? And I think that would be a real concern.
Okay, before we have general discussion, I just want to make one further point. There's one question about town meeting members and town employees being town meeting members. Take it to a higher level, and I know this is much more of a gray area, town employees becoming precinct chairs. And since there are very few communities with committees of precinct chairs, there's probably no law already outstanding. So that to me is a different kettle of fish as to whether an employee should be a chair of a precinct with the additional responsibilities and duties and powers and so forth that go with that, particularly with an enhanced committee of precinct chairs. So it's kind of a bit of a further question on the whole question that Rich Cirque has raised here. Okay, so commissioners, wrestling.
Yeah, I've got I think it's awesome that Mr. Cirque brought this up, that he has the guts to do it. I've had a problem. In a recent town meeting, there was a union chief who's a town meeting member who literally threatened town meeting if they didn't vote for something, that he would have to sue the town through the union. And the problem I have is someone like that was part of union negotiations. So there's the first bite of the apple. Then it comes to town meeting, and he gets the second bite of the apple. So he's already discussed and voted on how it works with the town through discussions. Then he comes to town meeting, and he votes on the vote that he's already taken, and then it's, if they don't get what they want, then they threaten the town. So there's a third bite of the apple. My problem with that is whether that town meeting representative in town meeting is representing the town and its constituents or representing his union. Because I have a real hard time believing that he can do both.
Wesley, doesn't the vote that he took at town meeting be a violation of our conflict of interest?
Yes.
Yes,
So he shouldn't be taking that vote.
yes, and.
Which gets to our enforcement section, which we're gonna
Yes,
start
yes, it does.
discussing.
And towards that, I had, when I was preaching chair of 5, I had 2 firemen in my precinct. And we were talking about, I can't remember the actual vote, but it was for if you took all this training, you could be this level and you could get this job. And we were voting whether we would still go by that or not. And my town meeting member said to me, this directly affects me, so I can speak to it. And I directly asked him, I said, are you going to vote at town meeting? He goes, the Attorney General says I can. And I said, yeah, but morally, and I've said this on town meeting floor many times, just once, I'd like to hear, when I ask the clerk, how many town meeting members have recused themselves from this vote? Just once, I'd like to hear more than one. And from what I understand legally, town charter supersedes the AG. So our conflict of interest should be higher than the AG.
Yes.
So, and I think this is something we should discuss. I have more of a problem with the union leadership being in town meeting and voting on something that they've already voted on 3 times. And I also think that I've felt that the union has strong-armed town meeting. And that's where I have a problem. I have a bunch of town meeting members who are no longer town meeting members because they were told that if they continue to vote the way they've been voting, that the union would not frequent their business anymore. So this is something I think that we have to look at. And it's the hard stuff. And, you know, I, again, applaud Mr. Cirque for having the guts to stand up to this.
Right.
I got my
Betsy.
hand up down here.
So full disclosure, I am a union,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
No, it's fine, you can go ahead, because I'm.
you haven't spoken tonight yet, so by,
Yep.
so I'm
No,
gonna-
I'll let
I'm
you,
gonna-
I'll let you go, because it just.
Betsy and then Scott.
So what I want to say is, full disclosure, I am a union, retired town union member. While I was a teacher and guidance counselor in Plymouth, I was also a town meeting member. So I just want to say that. And I think that I have done a super job representing all of the town. Since I became a town meeting member, I have given probably thousands of hours of my life to helping the town of Plymouth, and will continue to do so for a while longer. So the fact that I was a union member didn't, for as far as I'm concerned, no way affected my dedication, loyalty to the town, or my vote as a town meeting member. When I became a school teacher in the town of Plymouth, and then a town meeting member, I immediately asked the moderator, can I vote? Or should I vote, or how should I vote? He said that the school is separate because we never vote on anything there except the bottom line. And you're allowed to vote on the bottom line, so I did. I never saw that as a conflict. So I just wanted to put that out there. One of the things that came out with Mr. Neville asking us a question, Larry Pizer, I believe, told him that 17 meeting members were also town employees. It was not like some majority or something like that. It was a small number of people are both town employees and town meeting members. So I want to be sure that the audience doesn't get the impression that, 70% of all town meeting members work for the town, because that simply isn't true. It's a small number, actually, of town meeting members. One of the things that when people talk of conflict of interest to me with town meeting employees, being employees of the town, is that all the time that I worked for the town of Plymouth, we were the lowest paid of all the municipalities, all the towns and cities on the South Shore. So there was no proof ever that conflict of interest was raising the salaries of the police, the fire, the teachers, because the police were always one of the lower paid towns. The firemen were always lower paid than most towns on the South Shore. So if it were a fact that town meeting members are town employees who are voting themselves these huge raises, then Plymouth would have a lot higher salaries for their police and fire and teachers, and they have not. So there's no proof whatsoever that I've ever been able to see that town meeting members are voting themselves a high salary by being employees who vote for their own salary. I've never seen that. It's never, all the comparisons that I have ever seen between how, and I'm sure David saw this as a select board, in fact, David was negotiating my contract way back when. At no time were we a higher paid. In fact, if I had gone to Mashpee as a teacher, I would have made $20,000 more per year. So there's just no proof of what Mr. Cirque is saying, that the town employees are voting themselves these high salaries. And my third question is, if we can trust our town employees with our children as teachers, as policemen enforcing our town's laws, as firemen risking their lives, why can't we trust them to be good town meeting members? They don't represent just the fire department. And when I was a town meeting member and worked for the schools, I didn't think of myself as representing the schools. I thought of myself as representing the whole town. So I think if we can trust our employees to run the business of this town, we trust them with our money, we trust them with our children, we can trust them as town meeting members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
And for full disclosure, I am both a town employee and a union member. For starters, to speak to some of these things, town meeting doesn't approve contracts. Town meeting funds contracts. The contracts have already been negotiated and approved with the Board of Selectmen. Once the Board of Selectmen and the unions agree to a contract, it goes to town meeting for funding. Funding being whether the town can afford that contract or not. One of the recourses, should town meeting choose to not fund a contract, is for that union to take their discourse to the courts. That's the process that exists. It's not a threat. It's not, well, we're going to sue the town. It's an appellate process. It's an appellate process that exists for a reason. The one thing I do want to point out is town employees have rights. There's this wonderful document called the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the United States allows me, because everybody knows I've been a candidate for public office repeatedly, because for some strange, bizarre, altruistic reason, I try to improve our society on a daily basis. It's part of why I'm sitting here with you. It's part of why I sit on the Redevelopment Authority and the Historic District Commission, which isn't elected, it's appointed, because I choose to have a positive impact on my community, even though I'm a town employee. I'm also a taxpayer, and I pay a good amount of taxes. And Billy was over my last house before I got divorced, and I paid a lot of taxes on that ginormous house. So you act as if town employees are in some kind of a vacuum, as if we're these bad people that we only need to deal with when we need our trash picked up, or we need the park cleaned, or we need something else done, or there's a problem in our neighborhood and we need the police to come, or something's on fire so the fire department can come. Somebody's having a medical emergency. These people don't exist in a vacuum. They're your neighbors. They're taxpayers. They spend money in the town of Plymouth. They go out to dinner. They pay the meals tax. They participate just as much as anyone else in this town. And they have a constitutional right to run for office and to be representatives, much like I'm sitting here tonight. So I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of the conflict of interest laws, and I commend you guys for working on that and for improving that and creating an enforcement. And if there is I've said this 100 times, if somebody sees something at town meeting that's a violation of the conflict of interest rules, and they don't bring it to the town clerk, or they don't make an issue of it, then they're remiss. Because that's the enforcement action.
Right.
All right? And much to the point that was spoken before, an effort to limit town employees who live here, who pay taxes, who participate in our government, from participating in their own representation, either in town meeting or on the Board of Selectmen. You already heard my rant about the FinCom. I probably know more about the finances of the town of Plymouth than most people here. All right? Now, I'm not saying here, but I mean in general, including some FinCom members. However, we discussed that, and to Wrestling's point, when we discussed that, he had less of a problem with them being on the Board of Selectmen than he had being on FinCom. To the viability aspect that was spoken about before, I'm just, and this isn't me making any, I'm making an observation. Any attempt to limit town employees as either serving in town meeting, which we've chosen our Board of Government, even though tonight we're discussing what more or less looks like a town council, which I thought we should have went with to begin with. To anything that would limit their service either in town meeting or on the Board of Selectmen seriously jeopardizes the viability of what we're doing. And that's just an observation, and it's a 100% honest observation. Because when you try and take rights away from people, they're going to show up to vote. So my question is, do we really want everything we've done here, and I've sat here with you every night, sometimes once a week, sometimes, more. Do we want this to be for naught? I don't. I would be very disappointed if everything we did went away because we chose to push it just a little bit too far. Town employees have rights. And back to my argument. If you see something, if somebody voted on something they shouldn't at town meeting, then you should
Scott, the
immediately
question
file it with the clerk.
I have is, do you think you have a right to violate the conflict of interest laws of our charter? In other words, if it's affecting you personally, a raise or...
Then that's part of why I say we need to put some teeth. We
Okay,
need
but
to put some
there's two
enforcement in
separate-
that.
You can say you have every right, and you do, obviously, as a citizen.
Yeah, I do.
Except to vote something that's in your own interest.
In my
and
personal
not thinking of
financial,
the interest of the people you
I
represent.
personally would recuse myself from anything, and anybody who's known me knows that I'm above reproach when we do this stuff.
No, you say you're willing to do that,
Yeah.
but so should every other employee say the same thing.
I can't say what other people do or make other people do or whatever. I would agree that if there's a direct financial issue, that they should recuse themselves. I agree with that.
Right.
I do, and I would. But I can't, like I said, I can't speak for anybody else
No,
besides
it's a personal
myself.
decision.
But what I'm saying is right now, and I was a town meeting member for a while too, in Precinct 5, and I actually enjoyed sitting with the older folks, and you know what I mean? It was very entertaining. They had a lot of institutional knowledge that they shared with me. That's why if you see me in any of these things, I'm usually sitting with a bunch of older folks because they've done it for a long time, and I like to learn from them, right? But here's the thing. You're talking about interfering with people's constitutional rights. And I have a huge problem with that.
Right.
And like I said, I seriously think that doing so would jeopardize the viability of what we're doing here.
Larry, do I see your hand up? Mr. Pizer?
Yes, you do.
Go ahead.
I understand the comments about town employees having a conflict, and I understand that we have 162 people, all of whom were elected by their fellow citizens. But I think that we're ignoring the fact that every town meeting member has some conflict. The attorneys who are members of town meeting, and I think the one who spoke tonight is one of those, has represented people within the town and therefore has a vested interest in the way the town operates. I think that realtors have a vested interest in the way the town operates. I could go on for a whole bunch of different occupations. And I think the brilliance of town meeting is that these people are limited by the fact that they need to be elected. And if people are upset with them for belonging to town meeting or belonging to a union, I would hesitate to think that any of us are anti-union. I think that the idea that only town employees have a vested interest that needs to be addressed. I am appalled by the thought that town meeting would exclude town employees. I'm not in favor of the conflict of interest statute that the bylaw the section of the charter that we have, unless it's expanded to everyone else who has a possibility of having something favorable happen to them by the votes of town meeting.
Larry, excuse me, but the charter does have two parallel provisions. One provision, which deals with employees, and it says that they cannot operate if they have a conflict of interest, but it has a parallel provision that covers everybody else. It covers me as an attorney. It covers, Fred as a realtor, whatever. It says if there's a conflict of interest or a personal interest in your family, nothing to do with being an employee, then you are subject to the conflict of interest rules. So we're all subject to them in the charter, not just town employees.
No, I understand what you're saying about that, but it is obvious that there are people who are being positively impacted by their town meeting membership, and they're using their popularity as town meeting members. It's also the case, and I know this as in the olden days when I was town clerk, that it is not clearly stated what the rules are. There are people who would like to say that voting on the entire budget is a conflict of interest if you're being enriched by that budget. There are people who are saying that voting on a piece of the budget is a conflict of interest, and it has not been defined. So I don't think that we have the suggestion that town employees are violating the conflict of interest section of the charter. I don't think that's the least bit proven.
But Larry, you as town clerk know, because I've personally delivered to you a slip of paper that says I'm not going to vote on Article 27 because it deals with an easement in which I have an interest of a client as an attorney. I mean, that happens all the time. And we follow the conflict of interest rules. We abstain from those votes, just as a town employee should abstain from a vote that affects his own salary or wages. Everybody should be subject to the conflict of interest rules. This thing about how we're all taxpayers, so we all have that's just such a red herring. Come on. I hear that.
No, I'm not saying.
Of course it is. Everybody, of course, pays taxes, so that's not a distinction. You can't say, I'm not going to vote on this because I pay taxes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, I believe it was last meeting. If it wasn't, it was the meeting before. Libby made this great comment about the FinCom discussion. And she said that FinCom needs to be with beyond reproach, I think was your words. And I think what we're dealing with here is part of why I feel that we're standing here is we want to make town meeting stronger. We want to make it, better. We want to make it more efficient. And one of the problems is the perception, okay? And I'm not going to single out town employees. I'm not going to single out lawyers. I'm not going to but there's perception that there is special interest, that special interest sways town meeting, that special interest can threaten town meeting, that can push it a certain way. And I think that one of our jobs is to find a way that we can reassure the public that town meeting's strong, that we're making a vote for you. Time and time again, campaigning for this charter, we kept hearing, I don't trust my government, I don't feel it's transparent, I don't feel that town meeting, is voting for the public. So I think that's, the discussion we should have. And I totally understand where, I don't want an adversarial role with the town employees. But I do feel that the perception you know, and I'm talking about the public, I'm not talking just about me, that the perception is that there's that special interest that pushes town meeting in a certain way. And I think that's one of the things we need to look at, is how can we, when we sit down and we give this charter to the public, you know, and I think he's right, you know, if we alienate a group, they're not gonna vote for the charter. But I think that part of our job is to sit down and say, okay, how can we reassure the public who is perceiving different things, okay, this is the best, you know, government that we can come up for. You know, and I think that, personally, I don't want us to shy away from the difficult discussions. Because, you know, I enjoy having, you know, employees here that we can talk to, but we should be able to have that discussion. And I think, you know, sometimes we're shying away from, you know, that discussion.
Right.
And
Okay,
those-
so you see, Mr. Cirque, you've set us off here?
I just got one
Good
thing to say, Bill.
discussion.
Bill,
Pardon me?
I have one thing to say, is that the ballot box is the end-all, be-all. If people have a problem with town employees who are running for town meeting, then they can more than happy to go down and vote for somebody else. That's the American way. That's the power of the ballot box. If you think that this person shouldn't be on town meeting, then run. And if you get enough votes, then he won't be. But that's the end-all, be-all. That's for those people who express these concerns, who, you know, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how much in the majority of those people are. You know what I mean? We can get them all hats and stuff, from the way we can see them. But if they don't like it and they don't want them on town meeting, then they can vote them out. And that's the way it should be. We shouldn't prohibit a class of people and discriminate against town employees by prohibiting them from participating in the process.
Right, Frank, it looks like you're about ready to make a comment.
Yeah, I'm leaning in. I think I agree. Well, first of all, I don't agree that we should in any way prohibit town employees from being town meeting members. I don't think there's any movement toward that here. But clearly, from the comments on all sides, there is an impression or some fervor about whether we properly deal with conflict of interests or comprehensively deal with it on town meeting. And I agree with Wrestling that the impression that there could be bias of groups that could affect what happens on town meeting floor is a really potentially negative thing for the overall democratic process in town. So I don't know if it fits into the charter to, in some ways we're trying to do this on other levels to make a statement or have something within the charter or within the regulations, or maybe the COPC could have a statement to the degree that we more regularly address the issue of conflict of interest. Because as everyone's been saying, there are so many potential conflicts for people that this is something that should be brought up not just as a moment in the beginning of town meeting. I think there's a moment in every town meeting where there's a statement to that effect.
The moderator is supposed to.
Right. So maybe it should be a little bit more enhanced and more stated more often, or brought to the fore more often, because it's one of those very basic issues. People don't overall trust government. The statistics are clear across the country, and anything we can do to make people feel we're more transparent and more honest and more dealing with these issues up front, the more the better. And we need to address that if we can within the charter, without, in my opinion, ever considering not having town employees who are residents a part of town meeting. They're very valuable. They bring a lot of, as Betsy was saying, they bring a lot of experience and commitment to the community already. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cirque, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Michelle, is there any other public
Bill?
comment? David?
I'd just add, I fully believe in the full citizenship and rights and responsibilities of town employees and everybody else. The issue comes back to enforcement. I think we've got a pretty good conflict of interest, but not consistently observed.
Right.
And so I think enforcement and potentially, just like we have our warrant tracking committee, it might be worth, some kind of conflict of interest study, matching up the votes of
Right.
town meeting members with their professions, just to, and then flag the people who may have done, by calling out, giving some people tickets or publishing their names. Yeah, but the language is good, the compliance
we're gonna
is not good.
Look at the enforcement. And David, one other point, the Charter Review Committee that you and I both served on.
Yeah.
One of the results was, I believe the moderator is supposed to make a strong statement at the beginning of town meeting. And I don't think that's being done.
No, he makes
So
a statement.
Well,
I would leave out the word
It's not
strong.
what we had in mind in terms of this kind of statement that was to be made. We wanted it much more forceful. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our business here for tonight. Michelle, is there any more public comment? Go ahead.
I'm bringing in Ginny Davis.
Okay. Virginia Davis, we see you, but your hand is up. Welcome. But we don't hear you.
Ginny, you're muted. You got to press the button down in the corner so you're not muted.
You need to unmute us yourself so we can hear your comment. Well, while we're waiting for Ginny Davis to speak, the couple of things. We have the minutes from June 6th and June 9th, which Michelle sent out and are in our packets tonight. Is anyone prepared to move the minutes of June 6th to be accepted?
I'll move them.
Mr. Malaguti moves that they be accepted. All in favor of the June 6 minutes? And I think, David, you abstained, right? And over here, we have yes votes, yes. June 6 minutes are accepted. Then we have the June 9th minutes. Mr. Malaguti recommends they be approved?
No, I can't. I have to abstain from those.
Okay. Anybody, should we wait till Monday night to vote the June 9th minutes? Or are we ready tonight? I guess we're not ready to do those tonight, Michelle. So we have reached the end of our meeting. If Ginny Davis, if you can wish to be heard, speak.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I guess my question goes back to, and I think you've already got it into your new part of the charter, that town meeting members could be on the advisory and finance committee.
Yes,
Is that so?
that's correct.
Is that not a conflict?
Town
I
meeting
just-
members can be
I'm
on the
really
advisory and
uncomfortable with
finance
that, but
committee.
Maybe someone can explain to me why that's okay. I don't know.
Town employees, Ginny, we put in cannot serve
No,
on
I thought you
advisory
said
and
town meeting
finance.
members.
Town meeting members.
Town
I'm
meeting
sorry.
members can be on the finance committee, but not town employees.
Not town employees, I'm sorry, I meant town employees, we voted would, in this
She's
charter
asking
that we're
why
bringing
town
forward,
meeting
would not
members-
be allowed to be on advisory and finance if they're a town employee.
Okay, but they could still be a town meeting member, but they could not be on the advisory and finance, correct?
If a town employee is also a town meeting member, he can't be on the advisory and finance committee because he's an
Okay.
employee.
Okay,
Right, but
Okay.
town meeting members, and this is a change, can now for the first time be on the finance committee. Any other questions or comments?
We didn't
No,
vote on
that-
Richard
that-
Cirque's
no, I'm all
suggestion.
set, thank you.
Okay, Betsy?
We still have not voted on Richard Cirque's amendment tonight.
No, I don't think we want to vote on it tonight. Monday, if everybody's fresh, we can mention it and see if anybody wants to take a vote. David Peck.
Just a reminder, unless you were going to do it, Mr. Chair, of what's on the, highlighted in yellow, the homework you've given us to come up with a new preamble and introduction.
That's right, by the 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, and I have it in my to-do list, so I'm planning to do it, but just
So
all of
Monday
us
night would
should
be an
do it.
appropriate night to present it.
Yeah.
Good,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Any other old business? Is there any new business? So there being no new business, no old business, and the next meeting is Monday night, so a motion is in order to.
Motion to adjourn.
Been moved.
Second.
And seconded to adjourn, all in favor?
Yeehaw.
And thank you very much, Collins team, and we will see everyone on Monday night. Thank you.